So good evening, everyone, and welcome to our 2020 EuroISME virtual prize ceremony. My name is the Reverend Professor Philip McCormack, and I'm the chair of the EuroISME prize jury, and it is my honour to host this evening's event. There is, of course, disappointment that our conference for 2020 had to be cancelled, and I realise that everyone across Europe and indeed the world is dealing with what has been called the new normal. And so using technology in this fashion seemed to us to be a reasonable thing to do given the circumstances. And so, as usual, I want to begin with a range of thanks. So thanks in particular to our sponsors, particularly the Charles Leopold Mayer Foundation for the Progress of Humanity. We thank them for their support and for their generous encouragement in running what is, I believe, an important event. I would also like to thank my fellow jury members for their expertise and willing participation, which enriches this project. I never cease to be amazed at the way in which very talented and able professionals willingly give of their time in order to progress the subject of military ethics within Europe and indeed a little beyond. I would also like to thank this year's entrants, their tutors, the universities and colleges and the academies who participated. You would have heard me say before at a previous prize ceremony that I think it is testimony to the quality of education across Europe that the entrants that we have to read for this prize are of such high quality. I would also like to thank Ivana Gosic for her tireless and professional work for EuroISME and also for her dedicated work with the jury. And she deserves a special thanks. And if we were there together in Berlin and having a nice evening together over a meal, the whole society, I'm sure there would be a round of applause for all that Ivana does. And we thank her especially for that. I'd also like to thank the staff of Spurgeon's College who have made this technically possible, in particular Ms. Katie Jack, who is currently monitoring the live stream to ensure that it stays stable. You will have seen me speaking to Dr. Ted Rambarda if you joined us a few minutes earlier, and he is the brainchild behind the prize, which has resulted in such a rich resource for the international ethics community. And of course, I'd like to thank EuroISME as a whole for promoting the initiative. And then finally, to thank everyone who's taken the time to watch this either live or the recorded version via the EuroISME website. As I said earlier, this evening's virtual ceremony will follow a similar pattern to our normal prize ceremonies. I will introduce each participant and do some of the technical work, bringing participants into the ceremony and sharing images on the screen. And with that in mind, I'm going to invite our first participant. Give me a moment to actually, I'm going to, sorry Louise, I brought you in when I shouldn't have. I'm going to bring in Dr. Asta Malinosti. I apologize profusely for my appalling pronunciation of your name. It's a classic English malaise, and I'm so sorry. Asta, it's lovely to see you with us. And I know that on behalf of the jury, you are going to do the laudatio for the winner of the second prize. So if you would excuse me for a moment, I'm going to absent the screen and disappear. And then when you've finished, I will reappear and then admit the prize winner.
Okay, I hope you can still hear me.
Yes, we can.
Great, perfect, all right. Okay. All right, so it's a great pleasure for me to be a part of this historic ceremony. It is the first and I very much hope the last time that we get connected like this for such an occasion, because it really feels very weird still, even after months of teaching online. It still feels very weird to talk like this, and especially to give a praise for a work. But still, it is really my honor on behalf of the jury to give recognition to the winner of the second prize of the best European students' thesis on military ethics of 2020. Wing Commander Louise Henton, for the paper entitled Military Culture and Human Rights Violations Committed in Iraq in 2003. Has military learned its lessons? This paper shows clearly a necessity to look into the recent past and not only identify the issues, but also to work continuously on improving the moral compasses of our armed forces. It demonstrates that it is not only the technology, but also less tangible aspects of military life that need to be continuously updated and improved. And as those of us who suddenly had to move to teach in an online environment can probably attest, the human mindset rather than technology are much more difficult to improve and update. That this deep and introspective work received the second prize is an indication of a quality of thought that the topics of military ethics attract, and should be taken as a sign of how mature the field of military ethics is. That it is written by a serving officer is an indication that European armed forces have insightful and reflective officers capable of leading this colossal task of improving mindsets. With that, I wish to thank you for this really interesting reading and extend my hand virtually to offer congratulations on behalf of all of us for this achievement. Thank you.
Thank you, Asta. I'm going to invite Louise onto the live stream and put you into the waiting room if you don't mind.
Yes, thank you.
Good evening, Wing Commander Henton. It's a wonderful privilege to be able to welcome you and congratulate you to this on your prize, and welcome you to our virtual ceremony. I'm going to exit the screen, and then you have your time to give your outline of your thesis.
Lovely. Thank you, Philip, and thank you, Astra. So my thesis, over 15 years have passed since the worldwide exposure of human rights violations at Abu Ghraib prison and the death of Baha Mousa, both at the hands of Western soldiers. The purpose of my research was to examine whether military culture was a key influence in the committal of these atrocities. I reviewed the lessons identified against more recent incidents to understand why there have been reoccurrences and what more should be considered to reduce the probability of repeat incidents. Culture has been described as the bedrock of military effectiveness and is regularly used to explain the military's motivations and conduct. My research identified the existence of key traits of military culture: discipline, ethos, etiquette, and esprit de corps or cohesion. It is said that culture provides a sense of belonging, stability, and a common purpose for its members, and has been used to set the military apart from other civilian organisations. Military culture has also been held responsible for shortcomings, failings such as cover-ups, discrimination, and unethical decisions. Official military reports, government inquiries, and social psychology academia identified that dispositional, situational, systemic, and leadership factors played a key role in the committal of the abuse, that it was not just a case of bad apples. My research identified that elements of military culture also had a role to play, influencing the actions of those individuals involved and those on the sidelines. The military culture of discipline, specifically obedience to authority, resulted in the failure to challenge the orders to soften up detainees ahead of interrogation at both Abu Ghraib prison and in the British Army Detention Centre in Basra. The military's culture of professional ethos, the set of understandings which define corporate identity and code of conduct, often hold patriotism and bravery in high regard. It can create an overtly masculine culture, as seen within Abu Ghraib prison, where detainees were emasculated by the removal of their clothes and forced acts of sexual degradation. This behaviour was not challenged, and the female members of the team also joined in, most likely to ensure they were accepted by their peers. The culture of cohesion played a huge factor. Loyalty to the group encouraged others to participate in order to be seen as fitting in and misguided loyalty resulted in individuals lying during investigations and court-martials to protect their colleagues and peers. There are a stark number of similarities between both case studies, suggesting that the factors that cause such misconduct could also be prevalent in other cases of human rights violations. This was demonstrated via the examination of an additional case study, that of Marine A, where similar causal factors, systemic, situational, leadership, and cultural, were again identified. Analysis of this case identified that the lessons implemented post-Iraq 2003 did not address cultural issues such as the effect of cohesion and loyalty. This was a result of the failure to identify culture as a key influence on behaviour. Training and changes to doctrine were predominantly aimed at immediately improving the situation in Iraq. The lessons identified inadvertently addressed what Edgar Schein identifies as the outer layer of culture, artefacts, but they were not sufficient to challenge and address the inappropriate values and assumptions held by some military personnel. The future battle space has been identified as congested, cluttered, contested, connected, and constrained. It is likely that the ethical dimension to future operational deployments will continue to be placed under great scrutiny, especially as ethics can be used as a method of undermining political narratives. Any alleged breaches of conduct will be tested not only in law, but publicly in terms of political and social support. The veracity of the pace of news and instant media access can result in information reaching the public domain before that of commanders. Therefore, there is a need to better understand what factors affect the behaviour of service personnel to prevent against future malfeasances. When taking into consideration the cultural factors that led to the mistreatment of detainees in 2003, along with more recent examples of human rights violations, it is clear there is a need for military leaders to better appreciate how military culture impacts behaviour. The reliance on the bad apple analogy will remain a barrier to progress for as long as it remains to be used. The preference to blame a few rather than look at organisational failures prevents the culture of the organisation being assessed and reformed. The assumption that all that needs to happen to stop the abuse is to prosecute and remove those individuals who refuse to play by the rules is flawed. Organisations and leaders cannot prevent every act of abuse or moral degradation, but more can be done to increase the odds in favour of their personnel doing the right thing. The armed forces need to remain mindful of the weaknesses of military culture. The values placed on the virtues of loyalty, discipline, and team cohesion can be the very things that create destruction and bind individuals into wrongdoing. The ability to cultivate group identity is important, but commanders must ensure it is balanced alongside respect for the organisation's core values and the rule of law. To evolve, the military should facilitate an environment that enables the use and acceptance of reasonable challenge across all levels of the organisation, from the tactical to the strategic. This needs to start at initial training and be reinforced throughout an individual's career. An environment is required where cohesion facilitates the challenge of a colleague before they make a mistake, vice helping them cover up for it after the event. The case studies demonstrated that in instances of misconduct, individuals rarely act alone. They follow and conform to the norms of behaviour set by their group. The military needs to encourage esprit de corps and cohesion, but also identify better mechanisms to encourage the reporting of wrongdoing. Individuals need to understand that they have a duty to inform of immoral activity, and the military leadership needs to recognise that a barrier to doing so can be that such behaviour is naturally at odds with an institution characterised by respect for authority and loyalty. The virtue of moral courage needs to be given greater importance across all ranks. In order to reduce the likelihood of breaches of acceptable behaviour, leadership has a pivotal role to play in not just managing the situation, but setting and influencing the organisation's culture. Culture plays a crucial role in operational effectiveness, but also affects behaviour. This needs to be recognised, especially when personnel are operating under pressure, to ensure that the organisation's core values and standards are adhered to. These case studies remain a valuable tool in understanding what affects basic human behaviour. By understanding the impact of culture and appreciating that in times of danger or stress, the professional and moral character of service personnel can be eroded, will better enable the military to put measures in place to prevent repeat incidents in the future. The provision of training on core values at all ranks and the reinforcement by leadership of the positive traits of discipline, ethos, and cohesion to reinforce the military's core values and standards will better equip personnel with the understanding and skills to combat against ethical drift. This will help prevent further occurrences of human rights violations by the UK Armed Forces. Thank you.
That was excellent. Thank you so much for that. And I look forward to seeing in the academic literature how people respond to your argument and to your thesis. So thank you, Wing Commander Henton, and congratulations again on the award. And I look forward next year to actually physically giving you the prize at our next EuroISME conference. So I'm going to put you into the waiting room, if you don't mind, and continue on with the ceremony. And I'm going to show everyone, or share the screen, the image associated with your thesis. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, and I'll speak to you shortly.
Thank you, Philip.
And as I said, I'm going to share the image that Ted created for this particular prize. So give me a second while I share the screen. I think that's it. And you'll see in this screenshot the simple question: has the military learned its lessons by Louise Henton? I have to say I love the image and the concept created in that. So it's my privilege to do the laudatio on behalf of the jury for the winner of this year's thesis. So this was a fascinating thesis, and one which I must confess both enjoyed reading and found challenging. Let me explain before I invite our winner to join us. It is said that history is not a long forgotten landscape. It's often a place where events are contested and accepted versions of an event are disputed by the living. In 1954, Martin Luther King told his congregation that we are not makers of history, we are made by history. There is little doubt that the civil rights movement he was a prominent leader of had been moulded and shaped by history. If history is a deeply contested arena, and in many circumstances it is an area that can generate substantial emotional responses, the issues surrounding the West's colonial past are fraught with deep and enduring sensitivities. The winning thesis of the EuroISME Prize this year addresses the complex question of the extent to which the violence of German troops in the war against the Herero and Nama from 1904 to 1908 has become a significant part of the process through which modern Germany has and is coming to terms with its past. The author of the winning thesis, Julia Bucher, notes in her work that a basic understanding of the fact that history in itself cannot be mastered or completed, but that coming to terms with it and remembering it will remain a task for the future. As Asta said earlier, the standard of this year's entries was, as with previous years, very high. And that's a testament, I think, to the quality of our university colleges and military academies across Europe. Our winning thesis, which is entitled, "In the Face of Such Unspeakable Truths, Would It Not Be Better to Simply, Silently Bow Down?" Questions of legal, political, and ethical processing the genocide of the Herero and Nama. What was distinctive for the jury was that this thesis tackled a complex subject in a sensitive yet penetrating manner, carefully listening to competing voices and differing historical, legal, political, and governmental voices, whilst wishing to give appropriate weight to those who are considered victims and those who are their descendants. In her thesis, Julia observes that the memory of the war lives on among the population groups that are in direct descendancy of the victims, and it is the main reference point for their identity constructs. It is also about a symbolic power in national memory. Many Western nations are involved in a conversation internally and externally about how they should view and engage with their past, especially those who had colonies. Julia Boker comments that an apology is no longer a taboo break in the Western world. The tendency to face up, to own one's past, is becoming increasingly apparent. It is my hope that this excellent and winning thesis makes an important contribution to an important and ongoing conversation, though I will leave the author to describe the key arguments and conclusions herself. And with that in mind, I'm going to invite where is the, I'm still getting used to the technology. Julia, it is my privilege to be able to say congratulations on winning this year's EuroISME Prize for the best master's thesis in military ethics. It was a delight to read, if not challenging. I found it challenging at times, and I'm sure that those who are watching at this present moment and those who will watch this in the future via various websites will look forward to what you have to say about your thesis. I will disappear and hand the screen to you.
Thank you. Dear distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here with us tonight. No matter how far apart we need to be these days in order to stay safe, this is such a creative, innovative, and even fun way to get together in spirit and emotions to celebrate. Thank you for the kind words. The purpose of my thesis was to draw together historical, legal, political, and ethical questions to answer how to deal with the past. I strongly believe to guarantee peace and security in our time, which is determined by questions of global coexistence and peace, it is fundamental to deal with past atrocities, which have for so long determined the relationship between North and South on the globe. The German Empire has committed the first genocide of the 20th century in its colony called German Southwest Africa. Until today, descendants of victims in Namibia have to bear the consequences. While Germany has acknowledged guilt related to the Holocaust in World War II, full responsibility for its colonial past is still missing. So my essential point in my thesis has been, in the face of such unspeakable truths, would it not be better to simply silently bow down? That was a quote by Cora Andieu that I borrowed. Or in other words, in view of extreme violence, an apology can be a powerful tool of transitional or even of restorative justice. So it is my great joy and surprise and honor that my research has been chosen to receive the EuroISME Prize for the Best Master Thesis in Military Ethics in 2020. With this decision, an important and strong focus is set on the topic of collective violence and reconciliation between European countries and post-colonial states. I'm so very honored that this has been recognized by the EuroISME jury members. To create a future, we need to find ways of how to deal with the past. This is not only relevant in the context of my case study, but in many other reconciliation processes which are either going on or which are needed worldwide. So please let me express my deepest gratitude to the chairman and every member of the jury, wherever in Europe this may find you in these moments. A special thanks goes to Ivana Gosek, who has worked endlessly in preparation of the ceremony and the forthcoming publication of my thesis. I do share this award with many who have helped me along the way, and under other circumstances, I would have asked you now to stand up when I mention you, but as special times require special measures, would you please just pat yourself on the shoulder once I say your name. Thank you, Dr. Veronika Bock, Director of the Center for Ethical Education for the Armed Forces, or short CEBIS, in Hamburg, the supervisor of my thesis, who welcomed me at her institution with an open heart to do my internship and do my research with an open mind. Thank you, Professor Dr. Ursula Schröder, Director of the Institute of Peace Research and Security Policy, University of Hamburg, who believed my work to be good enough for the award with her kind nomination. Actually, a big thank you to the whole institute. It is not often that students take a baby break or move abroad during their studies, like I chose to, but however, I felt unconditionally supported in every moment of the journey. Thank you, Professor Dr. Anna Geis, Helmut Schmidt University, Hamburg, who evaluated my work as additional advisor. Dear audience, I do hope you notice the power of women in leadership roles here. Thank you to the CEBIS team, my colleagues who supported my work with many discussions, great ideas, and chocolate bars in certain drawers. And thank you, my dear friends who were asked to watch this without knowing what they would get into. You were the strongest believers that I could do this. And I assume at times that you believed even more in me than I did. 1,000 thanks. And thank you, my beloved family, my parents and my 3 soul sisters. We have this story in my family that whenever I'm scared, I want to hide in my parents' attic. And I'm glad you raised us 4 in a way that we would be ready to fly whenever needed. Thank you, my dear husband, Patrick. I feel like your name should be on the plaque as well. If you had not told me a million times that everything would be all right and that sleep is important, I could not have done it. I love you and I promise I won't study a 3rd time. And last but not least, thank you to my 3 kids, Vincent, Julius, and Katerina. Every researcher in the academic field should get your support. Reminder to take breaks, distraction when work is hard, laughter and happiness when things are overwhelming. You kept me balanced and you kept me healthy. And I'm very lucky to have you 3. So dear jury, I'm beyond grateful. You are not only bringing awareness to an important topic, you also honor that we have different roles in life. And certainly during the ongoing pandemic, moms need to be honored all around the globe. I raise my 3 children to be good European citizens. For me, this means to know our history first, and as my children get older, to become aware and self-critical of Europe's role in the world during centuries of exploitation and violence in the global south. And with time, I hope Europe, and especially Germany, my country, is able to ask Africa for forgiveness. So in closing, I want to accept this award in honor of every human being who has the availability to ask for forgiveness and the capacity to forgive, as this gives us a chance to work together towards a better future, be it on a political level, be it in personal life. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. I do hope you stay safe and healthy, and I see you in Rio next year in Berlin. Thank you.
Julia, thank you so much. And you're right. I think it is a powerful testimony, and it's one that I'm thrilled and delighted with, that you mentioned so many notable, capable, brilliant, professional ladies who are working at the cutting edge of so much that is good in terms of military ethics. Stay with me on the screen because I'm going to seek to share the image of associated with your winning thesis. And I think it's a very powerful one. And I know that Ted has secured the image. I find it a powerful and evocative image. And I think that's what I find so striking about your work, is that it forces us in the West to come to terms with and wrestle our way through the images that we find like this. Do you have I know we didn't plan on this, but would you mind if I asked you a question?
Go ahead, feel free.
Do you think that what I hope, as I said in my laudatio, that this will be make an important contribution to an important ongoing question. But do you think we're taking this seriously enough in the West, the issue of our colonial past? I know your thesis focused on a very specific series of events and a very specific war, But do you think we in the West could take this seriously? I genuinely hope your thesis will contribute to this, but just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
I do think that the French president Macron made a huge step forward when he promised Africa to return the artwork within a 5-year frame. However, it's a question how many will follow and also what other steps will follow in terms of recognition. And artwork is only a small part, but it can have an effect in the long run on the communities, I hope. Because what's really necessary is to see the African countries and communities on eye level. And I'm curious, like you are, if enough can be done. But this is definitely a start, and I hope more countries will follow.
Yes, and as I said in my remarks, I sincerely hope that your thesis and this prize and its publication will give significant impetus into an ongoing and important conversation. Congratulations again, and I look forward to seeing you next year. I'm going to put you into the waiting room and then invite our good friend Ted to come in and give us an update on next year. So
thank you.
Done.
Good night.
Good night. As I said, I'm going to invite a very good friend and somebody who's very well known to everyone in EuroISME. Good evening, Dr. Ted van Baarle. Welcome to the live stream. We're coming into the closing stretch of this particular virtual ceremony, and I wonder if I could invite you to take a few moments or minutes and talk about the plans for our next conference, and perhaps even using this technology more widely within the Society for Military Ethics in Europe.
Well, thank you very much, Philip. It's a great pleasure to be with you again. Under more normal circumstances, we would have indeed had the two prize winners, Julia Bucker and Louise Henton, now with us, joining a nice 4-course dinner with candlelight,
Yes.
a glass of wine, and in the presence of 100, perhaps 120 experts from all across the world. To both ladies, I can say, rest assured, your dinner will come. EuroISME has been working hard to reschedule its conference, which ought to have taken place last year. But I can confirm that these efforts have been successful. The German military authorities have kindly decided to extend their hospitalities to EuroISME, and our next conference will take place from May 5th to May 7th next year in Berlin at the Conference Center of the Federal Ministry of Defense, located at the Julius Leber Barracks near the airport of Tegel in Berlin, which is actually the same place where we would have been last week. Also, the conference topic will be the same. It will remain exactly the same: urban warfare and military ethics. A formal announcement of this development has already been posted on EuroISME's website. And on behalf of EuroISME, I express my gratitude to the Commandant of the Territorial Command in Berlin, Major General Breuer, for his generous decision to allow us to come to Berlin next year. So both winning ladies can already write in their agendas that they will have a dinner appointment next year. And as Philip already mentioned, then they will receive their trophy, a glass plaque with their name engraved in it. Moreover, at next year's dinner, EuroISME and also Philip also hope to welcome next year's prize winners as well. So the contest for next year's prize is now open, and students from all across Europe are invited, indeed urged, to compete. As Julia has not suggested explicitly, but perhaps you've noticed it, you don't need to write a thesis in the English language. It does not necessarily have to be your mother tongue. Julia Bucker won first prize with a thesis written in the German language, and it is now being translated officially into English at EuroISME's expense. The deadline for next year's prize for the submissions thereto is November 30th of this year, and that should in itself give the students who wish to compete for next year's prize sufficient time to submit and to prepare. They will find all the details of how to compete on EuroISME's website. As for now, I extend, on behalf of EuroISME, my warmest congratulations to Julia Bucker and to Louise Henton. I hope that we remain in touch even before dinner arrives. I conclude by pronouncing a very big thank you to the chairman of the jury, Philip McCormack, and to Spurgeon's College for making all these efforts to make this event possible. Thank you very much indeed. And with these words, back to you, Philip.
Thank you, Ted. I'm going to put you into the waiting room for a few moments while I conclude our ceremony, and then I'll end the live stream and then bring everybody from the waiting room back together again for a conversation. But thank you, Ted. I'll see you in a few moments.
Right.
I think that's extremely exciting news regarding next year's conference and the incoming prize. Can I stress again to everybody who will watch this, either watching live or in the coming months? We would love, as a jury, to be inundated with quality theses on a military ethics subject. And as Ted has mentioned, some of our entrants this year were not in English. And we have the capability of getting a translation done that makes it available to Luddites like me, who unfortunately can speak very few languages. So please encourage students in your universities or in your colleges or your military academies to consider submitting their thesis. And if you're supervising students that you think have written an excellent thesis that could be eligible for this award, please encourage them to submit it and nominate them. Well, I look forward to seeing you all in the flesh, as it were, next year in Berlin. My thanks again to those who made this evening's live stream possible. And I bid you all a good night as I end the live stream and then speak to all those